This is an interview conducted with, I guess we should say, Lieutenant Colonel Jerry Coleman, retired Marines, or Jerry Coleman, sports announcer from television history. And it's done on behalf of the San Diego Air and Space Museum for the Oral History Project. The interviewer is Ron Carrico. I'm a docent. Jerry Coleman was a Marine aviator, flew SBDs in World War II and Corsairs in Korea. He's the only pro baseball player to fly combat in 2 different wars. He played with the New York Yankees in their heyday and has announced as the Padres radio for the past 40 years. I guess 41 will be the next year.
40 years, a long time.
The object of the interview is to record the personal histories of interesting aviation highlights of various individuals, hopefully 1.5 to 2 hours. I'll try and ask simple, relevant questions with some follow-up for clarification. We'll start with mundane info and go on to more involved and interesting experiences. Hopefully we can end with a couple personal insights and beliefs. And after the tape is complete, I hope to have it transcribed for you to review, edit, and clarify where necessary. In any event, we will provide a DVD copy. One of the problems the museum has right now is we don't have a heck of a lot of money to invest in doing transcripts.
So this won't cost them anything. So.
Well, I mean, the transcription to have someone sit and tape.
Oh, I see.
So,
yeah.
Which is the best way to do it, because for the idea of an oral history is for people to come in and research it and say,
sure,
what was it like to fly a yellow peril, for instance?
Gotcha, yeah.
So we'll start with, well, your name and all that.
Yeah, my name is Jerry Coleman, and I'm here at the Air and Space Museum in San Diego, which I think is one of the greatest buildings in the United States, and what they have here. Anyone has a chance, come down and check it out. You'll love it.
So, now you said you were involved in the Navy V-5 pre-flight program.
Yeah, when World War II started on December the 7th or 8th, whenever they finally declared war in 1941, flying was a sometime thing for very few people. Not many people were in the air. Today, everybody's taking a plane somewhere. And consequently, it was an exciting prospect to be a pilot. And when I was a senior in high school, they brought all the senior students into the auditorium. And we're sitting there and waiting, and all of a sudden, from behind the room, came 2 naval aviators whose wings were that big. And I said to myself, that's what I want to be. But you had to be 18 to get into the program, which is called Victor 5, V5. And so I couldn't do it that summer, and I had to wait until I became 18 in September to join the V5 program, and that began a 1.5 years of hard work, and I finally was commissioned on April the 1st, 1944. It was April Fool's Day, I thought they were kidding me. But I became a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps, and I got my Navy Wings of Gold, and to this day remains the proudest moment of my life, period.
Wow. So why did you choose a Marine instead of Navy?
Well, Joe Foss was shooting down planes in Guadalcanal in I guess, August and September of 1942, and he was the first real naval aviator hero in World War II. He was a Marine captain. And so I thought, boy, that's really something. Then when I went to pre-flight school, which was March of '43, Joe Foss came to our group and spoke to us about naval aviation and the Marine Corps. And I said, I want to be Joe Foss Jr. When you're young and 18, you want to be anything. And that really started me. And then when I got to Corpus Christi, I guess in early, late '44, I was interviewed by the commandant of the Marines there. And at first he said, why do you want to be a Marine? And he's kind of scared me. I don't know what I said, but I got through. And so rather than being commissioned as an ensign in the Navy, I became a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps. And primarily, I would say Joe Foss was the guy that got me going in that direction.
How many times did you meet him after that over the years?
I saw him several times late. I mean, he became the president of the American Football League and retired, as a Marine and so forth. And he came out, and I made 2 or 3 dinners with him and had a chance to talk to him. And he still, to this day, remains one of my gods.
Now, the Marine, of course, Marine pilots don't often land on aircraft carriers. Did you ever carrier qualify?
Yes, I was carrier qualified, but not actually off a carrier. They gave us field carrier landings, which were worse than carriers because the wind changed all the time. You had to compensate for the wind and when you made your turns and when you came in. and we worked with the landing signal officers, and we did the same thing they did on a carrier, but it was field. And in fact, that's what got me back to the States in late July, I guess it was, of 1945. You know, the war was kind of winding down, and so they called us back from the Philippines. I was with a squadron in the Philippines, VMSB 341, and 4 of us were carrier qualified. So we went flying back to the States, get to Miramar. They sent us home on leave for a week, and you know what happened on August the 14th? The war ended while I was home on leave. So I never got around to that carrier. It's a good thing because we were all set to hit the Japanese mainland in November.
Well, let's stay in chronology here. So, where was this St. Mary's pre-flight? What was that?
St. Mary's pre-flight was in the Bay Area in San Francisco. It was a college, and they converted it into a pre-flight school. And there were, I don't know how many, cadets they had there at the time, but that's where I really, first I went to Alamosa, Colorado. That was in Colorado, up in the wild somewhere, and learned to solo. And I'm still starting the B5 program. Then we went to St. Mary's Pre-Flight School. Then we went to Olathe, Kansas for primary. Then we went to Corpus Christi and I was there for 6 months.
Now, which one, where was it that you flew the Yellow Peril?
That was in Corpus, probably Olathe, Kansas.
And that's the Stearman?
Yeah, that's a Stearman. That was a great plane, for what they used it for. And you sat in the front with the instructor in the back, and he told you what to do and how to do it, and then eventually you soloed, and when you did, that was a big moment for you.
Right. I think the one downstairs they said had been flown by Pappy Boynton. Maybe you flew.
Could have been. No, I don't know.
Did you ever know him?
No, I met him a couple of times in El Toro when I was called back in 1952, and he was sort of fading then. His health was not good.
Yeah. Well. So then you went to VMSB. VMSB stands for?
Heavier than air Marine Scout Bomber. Scout bombers were dive bombers. And the plane that VMSB was a Douglas Dauntless dive bomber. And that was a plane that sunk the 4 carriers of the Japanese in June of 1942 and changed the war in the Pacific. In fact, when the war started in December of 41, I lived in San Francisco. We had blackouts in San Francisco. We thought the Japanese were going to hit the West Coast. Well, when those carriers were knocked out at Midway, it changed the entire Pacific War.
Did we know it then?
I don't know if we knew it or not, but the Japanese knew it. They retreated and never came back again. They were in the Coral Sea, of course, and places like that, but nothing even close to the United States mainland.
Yeah. This now your squadron was called the Torrid Turtles. I love that.
Yeah, how'd you like to go to war as a turtle? After all. But it was a great squadron, it really was. And friends that I met there, I stayed with until they all passed. Most of my friends are gone, and we were friends forever.
Well, tell me some stuff about the SBD. Now, the reason I'm asking specifically is because, as a docent here, we talk about the different airplanes.
Sure.
And sometimes I like to talk about the people that flew the airplanes and, tell stories that are relevant. But there's certain things I just don't know about that airplane. And, having been a pilot myself.
The SBD was a plane that had a pilot and a gunner. And starting
I have one right there for you. Right next to you, right there.
Yeah, there it is. Right there is right. And starting in 1943, I was in Jacksonville, Florida, and I started what they call the advanced part of your training. And it took until April of 44 to finally finish. But one of the things I remember about this, I'll tell you this quickly. At that time, in Jacksonville, the SBDs used 90 proof gasoline. You're supposed to use 100 proof. And they told you what to do if the engine starts to pop. And so one day we're taking off, and I got about 40 feet in the air. All of a sudden, the engine started to pop. And I throttled back. I'm skimming over the top of these coconut palms. And my gunner tried to climb out. Don't ask me where he was going. But we finally got connected again and took off. But the SBD was a stable, great airplane for what it did. It was a dive bombing plane. Unfortunately, it had very little speed, a couple of 260 knots or whatever was about it. But straight down, if you got off target, which you do occasionally, and when you're coming in with 4 planes and there are 2 ahead of you and you're coming in from another angle, sometimes you get off target. The SBD would get you back just like that. The Corsair was not that good, I must say.
Okay, so you generally flew in flights of 4, is that right?
Usually, well, it depended on the mission. Sometimes you got on 12, you have 3 divisions of 4. And
So when you would roll in on the target, well, I guess, would you stack low or stack high?
no, you always stayed low. And the first guy would go in, and you'd go in after him, and we'd all follow down.
So you pretty
whatever.
much follow right and back of the same guy?
Well, not that close, but we'd go in right after him. But usually, when you came in a circle, you were moving out from that circle all the time.
Right.
So consequently, the first plane would go in one angle, the other would be in another. You'd be coming in sort of in a half moon
Right.
effect. The trouble is, if you couldn't get off target with the Corsair, but you could with an SBD and get back. Sometimes you swing off target.
So most of the time you were doing 45-degree dives, 60-degree,
Oh
70?
no, I'd say 70 at least.
Really?
We were straight down, and we had perforated flaps.
No, they're shown on.
And I'll never forget one day on one mission, I thought I opened my flaps, and I didn't realize it. And all of a sudden, we used to try to get out by 1,000 feet or drop our bomb and then pull out by 500. But once I'm going down, and boy, I'm really going, and all of a sudden I realized my flaps weren't open. And I had both feet up on the dash and pulled that thing up because I was way over speed, But anyway,
Did you have G meters in those days?
what's that?
Did you have G meters? To show how
No,
many Gs you
no,
pulled?
no. We didn't have any of that stuff. Too complicated.
Yeah. So I noticed there was a Captain Sailor, I believe his name was, who was killed in an SBD early on at Guadalcanal when his flaps wouldn't retract on the pullout.
Well, that didn't make any difference. Just slow down.
Well, no, but he got shot down by. the
Yeah,
Japanese
yeah.
rover.
I mean, if you're going full flap straight and level, you got about 100 knots, at best, which is nothing in the air,
Yeah.
And if they didn't retract, I mean, you got a problem. Especially not so much landing, but certainly just flying straight and level and
Well,
moving
was
out.
there a control for the dive flaps as opposed to the regular flaps?
Oh yeah,
There
oh
was-
sure.
There
Yeah.
was
That's separate control. Yeah.
Okay. And so you would put the flaps out. Would you put the flaps on before you roll in, or as you roll
No,
in?
you'd go in, and as you went in, you hit the flaps.
Right. And then the speed would increase to.
240, 50 knots, about 300 miles an hour.
Right.
But without them, you're pushing 400, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. So now this is the part that really confuses me, because I've looked at that SBD downstairs a number of times. I got up and I wanted to see what you see through the scope.
Well, we didn't use the scope. What they had was the bullseye, the red fluorescent bullseye.
Right.
And if you had to use a scope like this, which we did in training, it was a pain in the neck. You can't see anything, you do anything, and you're concentrating with one eye on
Right.
this. But in combat, we had the SBD-6, and I don't know when they started using it, probably the SBD-4 or whatever. But it was a phosphorus red bullseye that you used as your target thing. And so you could see around it and through it, and the target was always there. You never lost sight of the target.
So would you set the reticle, set a pipper for a certain?
Well, whatever button you pushed, it set it up.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking. When I look at this telescope thing, and it's about a 3-power scope. I'm not sure if that one has it on it or not.
I can't see it in there, but no, the early planes may have had that.
Yeah.
But I think after about SBD 3, 4, somewhere in there, they went to the scope, the actual phosphorus scope, where you could look right through it, see the target, and see what was around it. If you had to go through that scope, you had to use just one eye, and you're half blind.
It always seemed to me too, if you were looking through the scope the whole time, you'd almost find like a parabola down like this to keep the target.
No,
inside.
no, it wouldn't happen there. And you always check your altimeter.
Yeah.
If you're going down, you got 5,000. Now it's just 4,000. Now it's at 3. Now, when you start to get to 1,500, you had to start making sure you could pull out. Drop your bomb at 1,000 feet, get out by 500, and get out of there.
Did your gunner call out altitudes for you?
Oh no. He was in the back looking the other way, just in case.
Yeah. Well, I guess you were fortunate enough there weren't any bad guys around. that
Well,
time?
in the Philippines, in Luzon, in the early going Lingayen Gulf, we had several bombing nights there from the Japanese. I don't know where they came from, but I mean, we dug foxholes and jumped in them, and a lot of guys would sit and watch, and a couple of guys got blown away by shrapnel when the bomb hit.
Yeah.
But we didn't. I didn't spend much time checking the skies when the bombers came over. And I'll tell you one thing: you would talk about a fireworks. You know, all the ships in the port and the ground and had guns going a mile a minute. What the greatest 4th of July you ever saw.
I've asked several people what question they want to ask you, and Gordon, the guy that brought the models up from downstairs, he said, "Well, what I'd like to ask Jerry Coleman is which feels better, seeing the bomb hit on target, or hitting the game with a winning triple with the bases loaded."
It's a different game, folks. People said, what was worse, going out the bases loaded and the game on the line, a World Series, or going into? I said, hey, you strike out, you come back and do it again. You strike out in combat, you don't come back.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's no way you can put those two together. I'll tell you.
Now, you flew out of a place called Green Island.
Green Island was north of Bougainville, and it was an airstrip. Is what it was. It was a coral atoll, is what it was, and shaped like a half horseshoe or whatever. And we had an airstrip on it, and it was with Marston mattings, the padding, over the coral,
Right.
And that was all there was to it. There wasn't anything to it. But that was north of Bougainville.
Huh, yeah.
That was in the Solomons.
Right. Google map.
You got it.
I couldn't find a better map, but that's Google Maps. I actually looked up where Green Island was. So.
Well, that's probably it right there.
Oh, really? It's way up there then.
Yeah, this is Bougainville, and that's green, and we used to go after Rabaul and Kabyang, the major stronghold of the Japanese.
Right. It's now Kabyang. That's something I couldn't find, but that was a base, was it, or?
Yeah, Rabaul was the big one. Kabyang was secondary.
Right.
And I think, I'm not sure if I had a mission there or not, but I know that Rabaul we did go after.
At that time, did you know? So you were there in '43. So you were there a year after they got.
I didn't get there till
44.
until I was 19. I think it was July or August of '44.
Right, and then you stayed you were there about a year.
That's a fun. I was in squadron for 3 months or whatever, and usually after 3 months they sent you to Australia to enjoy rest and recuperation,
Right.
And I was all set to go, and it was coming up to Christmas time of 1944. And unfortunately, about a week before I was ready to go, they canceled all leaves, and MacArthur sent us up to the Philippines. We jumped on a ship and took off and ended up in Lae, New Guinea, and then all the way up to the Luzon area.
Well, so you were at the Green Island for not all that long then.
No, I'd say 3-4 months max.
Is that where you flew all the combat missions out of?
No. Most of my missions came in the Philippines. I only had about 6 missions out of Green Island. I'm guessing. I don't really. It could have been 8. Could have been whatever. But
Yeah.
our primary war came in the Philippines, and that's where I remember I got some time off. I went down to Manila, and got to Santo Tomas, the camp where they kept all the prisoners and so forth. And they had women there. It was really a mess, and saw that for about a week, and then came back and kept going. And it was after that we went to Zamboanga, which was farthest southernmost point of the Philippine Islands.
What were the living conditions like for the?
Oh well, we lived in a tent, had a bunk, the kind that you pick up and carry off, and then put a sleeping bag on it.
Did they have buildings where you did your briefings for pre-flight and all that?
No, it was all tent stuff. They had some, in bases when they became permanent, they built these sort of shingled tents or whatever, or buildings and so forth. You have the meetings in the morning or the evening before you're going on a mission.
So when you flew the missions, did you have a designated target first, or did you?
Oh no, we went in usually the night before. We're told what it was going to be, where it was going to be. Then the next day we went in, we were all set to go. But we usually had our briefings the night before. We could. Then we'd go in, and I'll tell you, the Philippines was a strange war. We'd go into the room, four of us. I forget what they called the flights, or some strange name. But anyway, and we'd be there ready to go if they needed us at the front. And we sit there from 5 o'clock until sometimes 6 o'clock that night, and all we'd go, is the alarm. And we thought, we're ready to go. And the thing, well, what's your availability? And then they keep calling back and drove us nuts. That horn, I still remember it.
What was that called? A jockey mission or something?
Yeah, jocks. Yeah, jock mission.
Jock
Joint
mission.
something. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, then you were supporting not just the Marines, but the Navy and...
Well, mostly the Army.
Yeah.
See, this was all Army stuff. And MacArthur, they put 2 or 3 squadrons of SBDs at Lingayen Gulf in Luzon, and we were there for a long. Then they went after Davao, the major island there, and there's a place called Zamboanga, which is like the end of an elephant's trunk, and we were stationed there. We go into Barney, going to places like that, and when things got hot in Davao, we go over there. A lot of it was missions that were preset. We wanted this, you got a dump over here, you got the ammunition over here, and so forth. And then occasionally we go and just circle and wait to be called in by these little tiny planes that tell you what's happening on the ground.
Forward air controllers.
Yeah, and one of the things that was bad about that is if it happened to be a windy day, and you're in this position, and they say, we got our target, so forth, and they hit it with a white phosphorus, and by the time we got back, that smoke could have blown away 100 yards. Really dangerous stuff because you get your own troops.
And then it also changed your dive angle quite a bit, too.
Yeah, well, we'd come back and get the right angle. That wasn't the point. The point was when that phosphorus first hit, you had to target it and make sure you knew when you got around,
right,
ready to go in, you knew exactly where you were going.
So how much did the backseater do?
Nothing.
Just ride along and...
If in fact there was air, I guess, combat from the Japanese, he'd be there to, you always went 3 planes,
right,
because what you wanted to do is have a conference of firepower in the back if you needed it.
Right.
We were never attacked by any Japanese planes.
Well, that late in the war, they were pretty much out of business.
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
So,
The thing that got you were the 90s and the 37s. Because a 37 would bump, 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 but it was like a machine gun, and if you ran into a flak field like that, get the hell out of there in a hurry, if you could.
So did you usually just make one pass, or did you make multiple?
No, that's right. One pass in World War II. In Korea, we had 3 bombs. We might come back 3 times. But what we would do occasionally, in fact, there was a couple of missions where we used our 250s up front to help them on the ground. The only problem was those 50s fired through propellers, and sometimes went right through the propeller. Many guys came back with holes in their propellers. See, it was synchronized, and sometimes the synchronization didn't work.
That's when you have a long talk with your crew chief, right?
Yeah, well, it's set up properly, but the closest I came to killing myself, and then you quit on me on takeoff in Korea. Just stop cold.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Okay.
What about the? Did you make formation takeoffs?
No. You go up, and then the leader would turn around, and you'd come in under him. He'd go out. If it's 4 planes, it'd be a quick pickup. If it was 8 planes, then he'd go out farther and come back. We'd join him as he went by.
So so you ended up with, what was it, 57 missions altogether?
In World War II, yeah.
And then, this is the next airplane I want to ask you about, which you've just barely mentioned in your book. The Pan Am Clipper. What was that like to fly one of those things? You must have had a few hours flying along in it.
No, I only got in it once. The Clipper from Hawaii to San Francisco?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what happened. When I was called back in, I think it was late July, early August of 1945, we had Class 2 priority. that was given to senators and presidents and people like that. And I got on this clipper in Hawaii to go to San Francisco. This is when we're coming back from World War II. And there are all these generals and admirals down there, and I'm upstairs in a bunk. So my class 2 priority beat there was class 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 2 was next to being the president, I guess. So,
What was it like to fly in those things? Was it?
it was like if you've been on a train on a sleeper, that's what it was like, except you're in the air.
Well,
The only thing I didn't like about my flight back was when I landed in San Francisco. I'd been gone a year, and man, I couldn't wait to get off that thing and get back. That's my hometown, San Francisco.
right.
And they towed them in with a rope on one end, rope on the other, and pulled them in. And one of the ropes broke, and we floated back into the bay. It took another hour or two.
Why didn't they just crank up the engines and pull her in?
No, they don't do that.
The one thing I want to ask you about on the SBD, that thing that pops out to kick the bomb away, does
Wings out.
it go first or with the bomb, or how's it work?
Well, I don't know. People don't understand bombs in a way because they have propellers on the front and the back, and they have to rotate so many times for the plane for the bomb to be armed. You can drop a bomb from 10 million feet and have it hit right in front of you. It won't go off if those propellers haven't propelled. They had a little piece of wire in the front and in the back, and when you dropped the bomb, that wire retained itself, and the propeller came loose, and it started to spin. So after so many revolutions, it was armed, ready to go. But I don't know what to me the 1,000-pound bomb on the SBD, as I told you before, that was a plane that sunk the 4 carriers at Midway in June of '42 and changed the war in the Pacific. And it was a tremendous plane. It had very little speed. Altitude got to 15,000 feet, you're in trouble. That's about as far as you could go. And most of our missions were run between, I guess, 8 and 12,000, depending what the ground was or what the enemy was doing for you down there.
Well, it's very stable, so it was probably really easy to fly formation with it.
Oh yeah, it was nothing. Whether you had a bomb or didn't have a bomb, nothing to it. It was a great plane. Probably one of the most stable planes in the Navy, from a standpoint of all you could see right over the top. You could look down the front, off the side. The Corsair, on the other hand, had about an 8-foot fuselage in front of you. You couldn't see anything. That's why I had trouble landing them on carriers.
Well, we checked. The Navy actually did fly. Had 2 squadrons of Corsairs and Corsairs.
They did when? What year?
I think towards the end of the war. I think.
Yeah, because they gave the plane back to the British, and they corrected it, or whatever they did. But the landing signal officer couldn't see you, and you couldn't stick your head out the side. Your helmet, your wings, your helmet and goggles will fly off.
So you came back to the States, and the reason you came back to the States, you were just getting rotated to go fly a different airplane? Was that
We were going to pick up a carrier and hit Japan in November, and it would be the SB-2C, the Helldiver.
I'll show you a picture of that. So. Which I know is not your favorite.
That was a monster. Well, actually, it was a better plane for speed. It had 420s up front, where the SBD had 250s. And this. Somebody told me once that this plane sunk a cruiser, a Japanese cruiser, just on strafing. Because the 420 millimeters, not one plane, but several planes got it. I think they sunk a small destroyer or whatever it was. But the thing, the SBD had no brakes to speak of, because all you needed was a tail hook to catch it. Well, the same thing was true with the SB-2C, except the first flight, I almost went over the top on this thing. I hit the brakes thinking I'm on an SBD, and the back end went up. I thought I was going to fly over the top because I hit the brakes too hard, and I found out later, don't do that.
So where'd you check out in SB-2C?
Cherry Point.
How many hours did you end up flying that thing?
Well, I was there I got there in August of 45, and I was out in January of 46, so I probably had 3 months of it at least.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And did you ever fall in love with it at all, or?
Well, no, it was a great plane, but when you talk stability, you can't compare the SB-2C and the SBD, but the SB-2C had much more speed, more firepower up front, more bomb load, more everything. It was a bigger, better plane for what they wanted.
Yeah.
It wasn't as easy to direct going down. There's no plane I ever flew that was good as the SBD in dive bombing.
Wow. Now, the SB2C must have had a much bigger engine, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. It was a Curtiss. I don't really know what they had. I didn't spend a lot of time. I do know the Corsair had a 2,000 horsepower,
Yeah.
and as did the F-47, you know, T-47 and those planes. But
B-24s and all that.
yeah, but that's another animal. But this plane was, I'd say, 1 times more power than the SBD
Oh, really?
in force and takeoff and everything. But
Wow.
it wasn't as effective from a standpoint of doing what you wanted to do with bombs.
Did you keep your same backseater from?
I did. His name was Stretch Meenan, born in Tyrone, Ireland. He became a police officer in the New York City, and he died recently.
Oh.
Well, maybe a few years ago.
Well, so I mean, you kept the same backseater in the SB2C as the SBD.
No, we were separated from the squadron. The 4 of us came back. We left the squadron,
Oh, I see.
and we picked up the SB2C in Cherry Point with a different animal altogether.
Yeah.
But the funny part of it, my pilot, who was with me in must have been at least 50 of those missions, his name was Stretch Meenan. His father became a major general in the Air Force.
Oh, really?
And he was a buck sergeant or whatever what he was.
You got to give it to those guys. I mean, sitting there flying backwards, diving.
Well,
at the
they
ground.
put their life in your hands. That's what they do. I mean, if you make a mistake, they're going with you. And what you're doing when you have somebody like that with you, you can take him with you if you go bad.
Did you ever meet any of the people that flew the SBDs at Midway?
Well, no, they were all naval aviators.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I thought there was a squadron of SBDs that were Marines that flew.
Well,
up
it could have
and
been. I thought the Navy did the job at Midway.
Yeah, but I think the Marines actually had some airplanes that
They could
got
have.
all shot up off of Midway that didn't.
They could have, very easily could have.
Yeah, or maybe that was that torpedo.
No, you probably know more than I do.
Well-
my story's a little shaggy at times.
Your stories are amazing. So here it is, and now it's August, and you're about to go back to the West Coast, I guess, to get on a carrier
Yeah.
to go to get ready for the invasion of Japan.
In November, they talked about it at the time.
Where were you when you first heard about the dropping of the first atomic bomb on August 9th?
Well, I'm trying to think. I probably overseas. You know, we got it through with the Air Force or the Army publications, whatever they did.
Oh, so you were actually on your way back then?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. Were you on a carrier at that time?
No.
So that must have been a...
No, we were going to pick up a carrier, and I'll never forget. I got home on leave, and I'm having a good time in San Francisco. I was home VJ night when they tore the city apart. I didn't go downtown, but I mean, it was a disaster. And a couple of days later, I got a call. I was Lieutenant. Lieutenant Coleman, I'd like to advise you that we change your orders from Miramar to Cherry Point. What? I live in San Francisco. Why am I going to Cherry Point? You're going to Cherry... Well, I don't want to go to Cherry. He hung up on me. I got my orders to go to Cherry Point.
Why'd they want you to go back there?
I don't know.
But now...
I have no clue.
Now, this is when you're starting to talk to somebody about getting out to go back to baseball.
No, I didn't talk to anybody about anything at that time. In fact, I just waited till they let me go. And what part of the getting out in those days was you've had so many awards or whatever, medals and this and that, you got out quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And I had 2 DFCs and I had 7 air medals. And finally, when I got to Cherry Point, they notified me that I'd be relieved in January of 1946.
So tell us about a DFC mission, or what stands out in your mind about the mission.
You know, I hate to belittle those things, but I think, you know, some people got them, some people didn't. Some you were written up. Don't ask me why. I don't remember any singular thing that I did that was heroic. I just made all the missions and survived, and some guys did. And I left about 5 of my friends in the Pacific and about 3 in Korea. Wow. And you don't know why or what. Whoever writes them up, I don't know who does that.
What happened to the... one of the things you said in the book is you wanted to sink an aircraft carrier. Did you ever get a chance to drop a bomb on it?
I never saw an enemy ship.
No kidding, not
I never saw one. We took a trip from the Solomons to the Philippines with a stop in New Guinea for about a week. And on the way, the word was there are Japanese submarines in the area. I thought, wouldn't that be great? They'd have to swim to the Philippines. Well, we got through okay. Some didn't, but we did.
Tell me about the radios in the SBD in those days.
Well, they're pretty good, you know. I guess, you know, you could talk to. We always had silence, you know, no conversation at all when you're in a mission.
Right.
And unless you really had trouble and like you had a engine failure or whatever, we never discussed anything. The only time you talked was the tower where you landed and took off.
Were these VHF radios?
I don't know. There's a radio. You could push a button, you could talk to the tower if you wanted to. Mostly we just listened. In other words, there are certain things you did. When you came home from a mission and there were 4 planes, you'd buzz the airport, and the first one would peel off, next one would peel off, next one would peel off, and unless there was some critical problem, you just landed. Or unless there was something the tower wanted you to know. In fact, one of the strangest things, my radio went out in one mission in the Philippines, and so I thought, well, about 12 planes, and I'm looking for some plane. I can't find, and it had about 5 levels of clouds. I'm up and down. I said, oh, hell, I'll go home. So I just took off and went home. And I just went over the field, came around, and made my landing. And I did not see a Barry's pistol, which I should have. But at the time I was landing, an F-86 had some kind of power, and he landed right behind me. Next thing I knew, this plane skipped over me, went down to the end of the runway and blew up. And I didn't even know it was there. And nobody said anything to me. I don't think the people in the tower knew the guy was there either.
That was Korea.
Was it Korea?
That was Korea.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Well, I forget. But anyway, it happened.
Yeah.
I was amazed. It was that right. You're right. It wasn't Korea. Right. It was in the Corsair. Right.
Yeah.
See what happens when you get old?
How did you get back? How did you find the way back to your place? Did you have?
Well, I know how to get home.
No, I mean, if you're flying from, you've gone on a mission, you've flown 150 miles or so, to get back to the base, do they have nav aids for you to turn on the VOR or something like that?
I guess if they did, they had them. I didn't need it. I knew where the base was. So I just turned around and came back, and I do recall the 4 or 5 levels of clouds. There's one level here, and I went up there and looked at the next one up, and then I went down and around. I couldn't find anybody. Yeah. And now I thought, well, I can't stay here all day. I'll just go home. That's right, it was Korea.
Yeah.
Show you where my memory bank is dead.
You've got a fantastic memory. Let me do something here. I'm going to walk around here. Just hold on one second.
Okay. That's a great model of the SBD, you know that?
Yeah, this place has some great models.
Yeah. Well, my SBD had a 4-bladed prop. This only has 3.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So was it an automatic pitch control or RPM control or?
No, it just had more power. That's all. Oh, thank you.
I thought you might need that.
Yeah. Well, if I do, I'll try it. In case I'm lisping my way through this thing.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so the war ends.
Mm-hmm.
Back home again, and let's sticking with airplanes here. So you go to work for the New York Yankees.
Well, I started with them in '42. I went in their farm system then. That's when I was waiting to become 18 so I could get in the service. And I signed a minor league Yankee contract with the Kansas City Blues at that time. And then went to spring training in Florida in, I guess, February or March or something of '46, and ended up at Binghamton.
So you got out in 45, but they discharged you in, it said Santa Barbara?
Where'd that come from?
Oh, that came out of the book here.
Oh.
Out of the book. It said you were.
No. I was discharged, actually. No, I wasn't discharged. I was put on an inactive status.
Right,
See,
yeah.
that's the thing that people didn't know. I didn't know it. I thought I was out of the service.
Mm-hmm.
And consequently, when I got a call from the major at the Alameda, in, what was it? I guess it was 1951, just after the World Series. And they said, "What do you think about going back in the service?" Huh? I didn't even know I was still in the service. So anyway, I said, "Well, I hadn't given it much thought. We're going to get you." I said, "Well, how long?" And he said, "1.5 years." I said, "Major, can you do me a favor? Take me right now in October of 1952. Let me out in the spring of 53, and I'll miss 1 year, or 54, or whatever it was."
Mhm.
It would be this, I would miss 52. No, they got me back in the beginning of 52 and let me out at the end of 53, so I missed 2 years. That didn't help my professional baseball career, but I didn't care.
You didn't care.
Well, I mean, there's a statement in there, and it's a true thing. I don't know, it's in the book. I said, there are only 2 things important in my life: the people you love and who love you, and your country. And I mean that. I'm not bullying about it. I mean that. In fact, if they called me back again, I'd have gone. For Vietnam, they wouldn't. I was too old. But I mean, if they wanted me, I'd have gone.
There was a lot of guys who were 45, 46 years old flying in Vietnam. I mean, you were older than that at that time.
Yeah, I was, what was I? It's like, when was Vietnam? What was the first year of that?
Oh, 63, 64.
Well, I'd been in my mid-40s then, yeah.
Yeah, well, I flew with a fellow who I was at survival school, and the guy that I was with had been a missile officer, and he was like a colonel, and he was like 45,
Yeah.
46, and he
Yeah.
said, "They're going to put me in F4s. I'm going to kill myself." So, you know, it was the same sort of thing. There was a shortage of pilots.
Well, the Marines had shortage of pilots for Korea, but not for Vietnam.
Right.
In fact, they were all helicopters, for God's sakes.
Terrible. So tell me about the transition to the Corsair. That must have been a real different.
Well, there's a huge difference in power. And the thing that I noticed most was when you're on the ground and taking off until... Okay, we'll go.
Stop recording. Okay, we'll talk about airplanes again. We got to stay away from baseball, or we can talk. I can ask you questions all night long about baseball. Okay, so when you flew back to the SBD for a second. The first time you soloed in the SBD,
Jacksonville, Florida.
were you by yourself or with an instructor? Or
No, I was alone. Oh, well, not when you solo.
Okay. And then the Corsair, of course, it's a single seater.
Yeah.
And so what's it like to go out there with 2,800
No,
horsepower?
as I recall, my first solos with the SBD, I was alone without a gunner. You don't
Right.
need a gunner for that. But
Right.
I don't recall whether that is actually a fact or not, but I don't recall a gunner until we got into advanced stages and so forth. In fact, one night in Jacksonville, this really happened. We're out on a night flight and we're, I don't know, they got things going off on the ground, and so we're attacking from the air and so forth, and all of a sudden I hear, pull out, break it off, break it. Another flight was coming from the other direction. We're doing, God.
Yeah, I've seen that happen myself.
I mean, it scared the daylights out of you. There are planes floating at you, you didn't even know they're out there.
So now the first Corsair you flew, it was a different model. It was more of a lightweight model. It wasn't sort of a heavyweight bomber. Is that sort of the idea?
Well, no, all Corsairs, when I went back in Korea, were equipped to carry bombs.
Right.
In fact, the strange thing about it was a B-17, when it went on missions, would carry up to 4,500 pounds of bombs. Corsair single engine had 3,500, which made it almost impossible to get above 10,000 feet.
Right.
Because you're carrying all this load. Once you got rid of it, then you could go up higher if you had to.
And so you said you had a single stage or double stage supercharger in it?
Had both. It depended. The AU was single stage supercharger, and the F4U was a 2-stage. It didn't make any difference because you're going to go up to about, I guess, 15,000 feet max anyway in Korea.
So first you flew the SNJ to kind of get recurrent and fly on airplanes.
Yeah.
And then you go to the Corsair. And then
No. Oh, you're coming back, yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
now
right.
so when you transitioned to the Corsair, then how many hours did you have before you went overseas to PMA 323?
Well, I guess I probably, let me see, I'm trying to think when I was called back. Was it? I would say that I probably had 100 maybe. I'm guessing. I really don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, I think you went back, in May 52, I think is when you got called back in again.
Yeah.
So, but I like the fact that they, when you went back in 53, they gave you a share of your World Series proceeds. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought that was nice too. It wasn't a full share though. It ticked me off. Well, I was the league and the player representative for the Yankees, and like when Billy Martin, when he came back, we gave him a full share. You know.
Oh, he went back in too?
Well, he went in, not back in. I mean, he just went in, and when he came back, we gave him a full share, and I forget who else, because Billy I had more relationship with the same position and came from the same area.
Right.
And there are other players who came back who were in the service. Whitey Ford, we gave him a full share.
But Billy Martin died a long time ago.
Well, yeah, that's 10, 15 years, I don't know. See, Billy and Whitey and Mickey were glue. In fact, at the end of Martin's career with the Padres, he and Whitey and Mickey had connecting bedrooms. They were buddies, real buddies. And consequently, Billy would not have been a good example for guys because he was an alcoholic. And he had trouble, and they're still trying to figure out who was driving the car when they was killed.
Oh, it was a car crash.
Yeah, up in New York, yeah.
So, well, I guess you probably never knew Reggie Jackson very well, probably.
I knew him quite well, I mean, but not socially.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'd see him all the time. In fact, I saw him in New York last, was it June or July, when at the Old Timers game, yeah.
There's some of those things, those moments you'll never forget where you were.
Yeah.
Like Kennedy and all that. Boy, I remember when Reggie Jackson hit that third home run in the World
Yeah, well,
Series.
he did that.
And I said to other people, he's going to hit it. He's going to hit another.
I know. He did it.
Okay, I'm talking too much about baseball. Okay, so you went to a squadron with a little different name than the Torrid Turtles.
Well, I thought that was that VMSB with turtles. I thought, how can you win a war with turtles, for God's sake?
So then you go to Korea and you get the Death Rattlers.
Yeah, we upgraded a little bit.
What was it like to go back? Now, when you went back to check out the Corsair, there was other guys who were of World War II vintage.
Pretty much the same, yeah. Actually, as I recall, now this is a recall because you're reaching back 60 years or whatever, but it seems to me the TO for a squadron was 40 pilots. I think we had about 16 in Korea. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, you can look this up, I think I was with on the first mission with an African-American Marine pilot.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. It was in Korea someplace.
What was his name? Yeah.
I have no clue. We don't pay any attention to those things. You know, he's your teammate. It's like we're on the mission when Williams got hit. Okay, I got a mayday. I got a mayday. That's your brother. You don't know who the hell it is, but it's your brother. It's one of you. And the next day we found out it was Williams, and of course that really shook him up a lot. I know.
Really?
He almost got killed. He landed, no flaps, no wheels, no nothing. And why the plane didn't blow when it hit, I don't know. It could have. Anyway, he got out of it okay.
He got hit by flak or something like that, I guess.
Yeah, we were hit with something. The point of it, Ted was 6 years older than me. And, you know, I was called back when I was 28. He was 34.
Wow.
And that's a pretty late stage, really. But the Marines didn't train any pilots from 1945 to 1950. In fact, if you recall, Truman tried to disband the Marine Corps in the late 40s.
Right.
And at that point, the Marines just had nothing going for them. And that's why they went into the reserves.
That's why you got called back.
Oh, yeah, sure. They had no pilots.
So now, there was no active reserve after World War II.
Well, what they did have, they had weekend, you could join a weekend squadron, you know.
Right.
And I didn't. I didn't have time for that stuff. In fact, I'd probably get a pension if I'd have been smart and done my stuff in the summertime, but I couldn't do it. I was playing baseball all the time.
Right.
So I never got involved in active squadrons or anything like that.
But after you got when you were out of Korea, then you stayed in, I mean, obviously stayed in a long time to become a lieutenant
Well,
colonel.
what I did, I did a lot of promotional work for them in New York. I went to Washington several times, and sort of upheld the Marine Corps image, I guess you can use that. But from 1945, when the war ended, the door was shut. And in 1950, when the North Koreans hit South Korea, and the Marines almost were disbanded in the late 40s, if I'm not mistaken.
So when that happened, you didn't even think about having
No,
to go back in again.
no.
And then the phone rings.
It's all right. I say this to this moment. That, to me, the greatest moment of my life wasn't baseball.
Yeah. I can believe it. So now, now you go to where did you fly out of in Korea?
K6. See, all the airports were K1 to,
Okay.
I think 55 was the highest. In fact, Bobby Brown, I don't know if you know who he is, but Bobby Brown played for the Yankees, was president of the American League, a cardiologist. They named a wing in the hospital in Fort Worth after him. That's how good he was.
Oh, wow.
And he and I grew up together in San Francisco. So one day, I don't know how this happened, but George Weiss got a hold of him and said, "Can you get Coleman out of Korea?" So I got a call from Bobby, and I, on the cell phone, the crank, I said, "Well, I'll come up and see you. We'll talk about it." So I take off from 6. I was through the squadron at the time, and I go up there. This runway was about as long as that table, and I finally got in, and I'm looking. He was up at the front with the wounded soldiers. I never got to see him. I said, I went up to see you. You almost got me killed, for Christ's sake, getting in and out of that place. But no, it was a different story then. I don't know how they work the reserve now, but when World War II ended, I thought it was over. God, they saved the world. Let's get back to doing something. Then Korea hit, and in the meantime, I never got promoted when I was in World War II. I was the longest standing second lieutenant in history. And finally, I got first lieutenant when, I was out of the service, active service, and they promoted me to captain. And so I'm a captain now. In fact, most of the recalls in Korea were captains, like me.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I got out of Korea, I went to work for the Marines, helped them with promotional things and getting recruits, et cetera, and in New York, where it was a major market, of course. And then they finally retired me sometime in 1964, I guess, I don't know, somewhere in there, completely. Now I'm totally retired, which doesn't mean they couldn't recall me if they wanted to. Not that they need me, but I'm just saying, I'm still...
After women and children. Right?
Yeah, after women, yeah, that's right, after the girls.
So and you flew, about 60 missions in Korea?
63, because I got 120 total, yeah.
57 in the SBD and 63. So you had two really, you told me that you had, 3 different airplanes tried to kill you, and the Corsair tried to kill you twice, it sounds like.
Well, it was at the landing with no radio when the F-86 skimmed over the top of me, and I'm going down the road, all of a sudden here comes this plane right over the top. What the hell is that? And apparently he had a flame out or something right above our airfield, had to land, and it just went to the end and then blew up down there.
I wonder why you didn't punch it out. Too low and slow for
the thing that I always wondered, did they shoot a Various pistol up there that I didn't see? I know they didn't, because I would have recognized that immediately. And once you see that, you get out and go, because get out of there. But I didn't see anything. And then, of course, the one that quit on takeoff was the highlight of my Korean experience.
Yeah, well, tell us about that.
Well, it's very simple. K6 had a bump in the middle, and when you hit that, you go up about 8 feet, and then you come down and take off. And I hit that bump, went up, and boom, stopped cold. So I'm braking and braking and braking. I ain't gonna make this, so I let my bombs go, because I thought if I burned, I'd blow up the base and myself too. So the bombs are flying all over the place. And one of them may have hit my tail wheel, because it was about at the end of the runway when I realized I wasn't going to stop. And the next thing I know, I'm going like this, And I remember to duck. Well, when I get done ducking and I'm buried in the dirt, my knees are behind my ears and my hands are pinned to the side. And the helmets that they had in those days, they had a strap under here that was supposed to give after a certain amount of pressure. Mine didn't. And all of a sudden I said, oh, well. And what saved me was the guys coming down the runway after me, the crash crew. They just, once that plane stopped, they're out there midway, you know, they kept right out. I didn't know it till later, but, and the next thing I know, I woke up and I got dirt all over me and I'm half groggy and so forth. And they pulled me out and sent me back to the hospital, and I said, you know, I got a migraine headache. I used to get them when I was in high school because my vision would go when I'd have a migraine headache. And so they put me in the hospital, and then, I don't know, about 8 o'clock that night, they let me out. 4 o'clock in the morning, they called me and said, you're on a mission. So off we went again.
Oh, wow. So what are the missions like? What did you do?
It depended. Some were deep interdiction, some way up toward the Alu. You know, we'd go deep in across the Heiju, which was a sort of barren area like the size of Texas, and then you get over there and you hit the targets, whatever they had for you. I don't know what, hard to tell you, but this ammunition group, that building here, this there, and so forth. And then others, we'd go up and circle south of the front line, wait to be called in. And usually we'd sit in the ready room, and I told you about that buzzer would go off, and we'd all jump. What's your availability? And we sometimes just stay there all day long. Then we'd come back the next day and do the same thing. And usually if one group went up, you'd be number 2 and then number 3, depending on what list you're in. And we just spent a lot of time there, which I thought was worse than the missions, to be honest with you, the anxiety and wondering what's going to happen. Then we'd go up there and we'd circle, and then they'd shoot white phosphorus 20 yards to the right of that or 50 yards to the right. Well, when you swung around, as I told you, if it was a windy day, that stuff would move. You know, where the hell that thing? You had to be very careful to spot it before you made your turns, and then you'd come in and get them and get the hell out of it.
Were you doing 2 ships or 4 ships, or what was it? How many people in the formation usually?
Usually 4. 4 plane chocks, yeah.
Now, now you're doing something different though. You weren't doing the 90-degree dive bomb at this point.
Well, the Corsair couldn't take a 90-degree bomb. I mean, we'd go 45, 50 maybe, but this plane had no diving flaps. Oh. And once you got off target, to get that thing back, you had to be a weightlifter. I mean, it was really difficult to do. So you really had to get your needle, ball, and airspeed right all the way in and make sure so you couldn't get out of it. Sometimes we'd carry napalm if they wanted to go after troops on the ground, or rockets if there are certain specifications.
So if you did a 45-degree dive bomb, did you kind of talk me through it? I mean, this is what we did in the F4. You pull the nose up, roll in, upside down.
No, you always were on target this way, and the plane in front of you is ahead of you, and you're going right behind it with your eye on the target, and then you'd get settled in for your run and stay there. If you got off target, you had a tough time getting back.
Were the controls real heavy at the higher speeds?
Well, the speed of the plane, it wasn't built for that kind of work, you know.
Yeah.
In fact, Lindbergh's the guy I'm looking for. He's the guy who said, put bombs on this plane. I said, well, why don't you try it? It was not what I call the perfect plane for bombing missions.
I think it was an air-to-air airplane. I think that was the idea.
Well, that's what it was in World War II.
Yeah.
And it was a great plane to fly, but don't misunderstand. But the hanging bombs on them was difficult if you got off target. Now, there's some things were easy. If you got napalm or if you got rockets or something, it's not a problem at all.
And the rockets, well, the one we have hanging downstairs, those are those 5-inch white rockets. I guess you carried those things.
You had a lot of firepower in that.
Yeah.
That was all air to ground. It wasn't air to air.
Right. But I mean, when you fired those things, I bet that was
I don't remember much of that problem. I don't remember the feeling that we had a weight loss. I don't remember that. I really don't.
Yeah, I just remember from missiles I launched.
No, my highlight trip with the Corsair was in El Toro. I just took off, and all of a sudden, this shade comes up in front of me. They put too much oil in the goddamn plane, and it went right over my windshield, and I was blind. I'm not kidding. So I got my head stuck out to try to see where the hell I'm going to land this damn thing. And it's like someone put a shade over you.
Oh, jeez.
I thought it was exciting. Yeah, I like that.
Well, did you fly instruments very much?
Oh yeah, in fact, we had the instrument thing. And they have a chase pilot, you know.
Right.
You put it over you, and they give it. You know, you're flying off instruments. You're in the
Right.
plane by yourself, but there's a chase pilot in case some other plane or something happens, and you know you had to go from A to B to C to do whatever it was, and we'd fly blind really.
Did the radios change between the SBD and the Corsair? Is there any advance?
Probably, but I don't remember. I didn't spend a lot of time on that stuff. If it worked, it worked. If it didn't, the hell with it.
Now they had water injection in the Corsair, right?
Water injection?
Water alcohol injection, you know, when you put the boost on, you need, you know, emergency war power.
I never used that.
Yeah.
No, I don't think anybody else did. In other words, if there's, you got to move the hell out of there. We never had that sort of a problem.
Yeah.
But my favorite was the Guggenheim. Did you check the Guggenheim switch? Apparently there's some kind of a funnel you had to release to let crap in there that built up during a flight or whatever. That was the ground crew.
I wonder what it was.
Check somebody that knows something about the Corsairs and ask them what the Guggenheim switch was, or Guggenheim, whatever, I don't know. I could never figure it out. You know, I'll tell you, you're looking at a guy, I trusted my mechanics completely. And all I had to do was start the engine and get the hell out of it and get it back. I never worried about any problem until I had that problem in Korea. Then I worried all the time. I go, come on, let's go.
So, when you flipped the airplane over, or it flipped itself over, the bomb flipped it over, what mission number was that?
I don't know. It was probably midway. I'm not even sure.
But you hung in there for quite a few more missions, though.
Yeah. Well, that's my job, you know. Actually, that really affected me, and I started to hyperventilate too at the end.
I was wondering what you meant by that. When did you hyperventilate?
You have trouble breathing, you know.
But in the air or before you go out?
Anytime, you know. You just you get symptoms that what was happening without my realizing it. My physical well-being was deteriorating.
Was it
I
because
didn't
of
even know it.
diet or lack of exercise? Or?
No, just pressure.
I've noticed your roommate Max Harper was killed in that.
Oh, yeah, well, that's what really bothered me, and it wasn't that bothered me, because he blew up in front of me by 100 yards. Now that could have been 300 yards, but right there. And what happened, I always try to figure, he did a snap roll, and I know what happened. He pulled his stick and stuck his rudder up, and it flips you like that. And then he went into a slow, gradual into the ground. And I had to stay with him, because I had the section behind. We had two new guys, one on his plane, one on mine. They disappeared from here. So I chased him down, and then I got the hell out of there. And once he hit, I saw no parachute, no nothing, and so forth. And finally, in Korea, we had a group of 4 planes on the East Coast and a group of 4 planes on the West Coast. If you got into trouble, you could call them in and then bring a chopper in to get whoever was down out. And I remember these guys, I called in, I forget what I told the other guy, pull out left, hot over here, or something like that, you know, because that's where he got hit. You don't see this stuff, you know, but it's there. And consequently, somebody in the west side said, we're ready, you need us. I said, no, it's nothing you can do here, and that was the end of that. Then I flew back, and after I circled several times to make sure there was no whatever, and went back to the base, and then got drunk. No, I didn't get drunk. I didn't drink, but I should have.
That's sad. So he was, and so.
Well, the sad part about that, and I'll relate this, it's one of the few early chapters from the book. They had a day for me at Yankee Stadium when I got back from Korea. And of course, I'm sweating bullets because I have to make a speech. They're going to play me in the game. I haven't been in the game in 2 years. Anyway, I get a phone call, and so, hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm Max Harper's brother-in-law. His wife is here. She'd like to talk to you. This was in the concourse class, I think, in Bronx. And I said, all right, I'll come down. So I went down, and he had 4 or 5 kids. And she wanted to know if he was dead, because she knew I was on, how she found out I was on that mission. I saw it, and I said, yes, he's dead. I never saw, bothers me to this day, a look on a woman's face like hers. God, it was awful. It's awful. It was worse than combat.
But that took a little of the pressure off of making a speech, I guess.
Well, I had to sign certain papers, to authenticate that he'd been killed. And I guess it helped her get whatever she needed for the kids. I don't know. But it was
Was he a World War II guy as well?
yeah, he was a major, sure.
Oh.
Yeah, he was one of the rest of us were all captains. And there was but he I think he was a reserve raiser. I mean, a reserve major regular. Let me put it that way.
So did you were the number 3? So you were the flight lead.
I had a section.
You had a section.
Yeah, he had the lead. There was a wingman with him. I had his section. There was a wingman with me.
So then after that, they put you into a few flights after that, I suppose. I guess they made you a forward air controller.
Well, I don't think they wasted a lot of time, really. They didn't have a lot of pilots. That's all I can say. It's amazing that period from 45 to 50, there were no one was really trained in numbers, and this was in 51. They started in June 51, early 52 that they just ran out of pilots, and they went to the reserve.
So the guys that were flying with you, there were new wingmen. Were they just out of pilot training themselves?
I don't know.
Probably late 53.
I don't really know.
Into 53.
I don't really know. In fact, I have trouble with the years and everything. It's so long ago, like 60 years ago. It's hard to remember.
Oh, it's still amazing. It's still amazing. Because doing these oral history interviews,
It's hard.
a lot of people don't remember much, and I'll tell you, my uncle was in World War II, and he started a newspaper they called it the Mojack Bugle, whatever that was, and so all the guys remember it. And they seem to remember the happy times of the ladies they were with in Germany and that kind of thing far more than anything else. Of course, they were not aviators. Aviators are always sort of removed from the situation, and you don't see some of the carnage that's caused on the ground.
Well, to me, I say I fought a clean war. There's no one standing next to me have his head blown off like they do on the ground. Infantrymen really take a hit. I saw a friend of mine blow up on the runway in Green Island. What the hell happened, I don't know, but up he went. And it's a distance thing. You don't see the real blood and guts.
Yeah.
Phil Doty, that's who it was.
So what sort of, here we are all these years later, and December 7th was just 2 days ago, and do you have any kind of personal observations about World War II?
My observation is I thought we'd settled things in World War II, and it ended on August 14th. I thought it was over.
Yeah.
And things were going to be great. And God almighty, 5 years later, we got Korea. Another few years later, we got Vietnam. Now we got the Middle East. And my only thought is, can't we get this straightened out, for Christ's sakes? Can't we get organized in this world? It bothers me. Look what's going on in the Middle East. I mean, my God, they're killing people in Syria. They're killing more civilians than they are Army and Navy and the rest of it. It's tragic. I don't understand it. We can't get our Congress to get together, for God's sakes. If you're a Republican, you hate the Democrats. If you're a Democrat, you hate the Republicans. Let's get together, guys, and get something done, I don't know. I don't understand it.
And we're still, at loggerheads, we're still basically at war with Korea after all these years.
Never ended.
So we got some time left. You want to talk about a little baseball stuff?
Yeah, go for it. I don't care.
Tell me about your season as a manager.
I was brilliant. The players were lousy. No, that was a mistake on my part, and it was caused by a guy named Bob Fontaine. We grew up together in San Francisco, and whatever year it was, I don't know, and he said, "Why don't you manage the club?" We talked baseball all the time. He was the general manager, and I said, "I will. If you're my pitching coach, I'll do it." I was kidding, you know, and this went on throughout the summer. And the club was having a bad time, and finally, about 3 weeks before the season ended, I said, "Bob, are you serious?" "Yes." "What do you mean?" I said, "What about Roger? He's your manager." "He's going." "What do you mean he's going?" "He's going to get fired." I would not take a man's job, you know, if we
Sure.
I just wouldn't do that.
Who was Roger at the time?
Roger Craig,
Roger Craig. Oh.
who I think resented it. We've been okay since, but, you know, to have some broadcaster come in and take your job, you know. Anyway, I said, well, let me think about it. So about a week later, I'd been broadcasting Padre games for, I
16
guess
years.
it was about 8, 9 years, whatever.
Yeah.
And lousy teams year after year. I said, well, maybe something different will be better. Maybe I can help this club. I don't know. So I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I did. And consequently, what I didn't realize at the time was managers are accepted or not accepted by their reputation. Nobody knew what the hell I was. And there are a couple of guys to this day that if I had a chance to blow them up, I would, because they just talked against me throughout the entire season and so forth and so on. And anyway, it was a mistake because I wasn't prepared for it. I didn't know what to do or how to do it. I don't mean that completely, but what I will say this, had I had a chance to do it over again, I said, okay, I'll manage, send me to the minor leagues, give me a year of experience, what I'm doing,
Sure.
and so forth. And I knew the game, I wasn't concerned about that, but there are some things that handling other players is more important than what you know about the game. You know, Yogi Berra is a good friend of mine. He's not a Phi Beta Kappa, but he was a good manager. Casey Stengel couldn't tell you what the hell he said half the time, but he knew how to manage. And Bud Black is intellectually one of the finest men I've ever met in baseball as far as intelligence is concerned. Tony La Russa, another, he's a lawyer. These are guys that are above and beyond just being baseball managers. So consequently, it was a great experience. It taught me one thing, that, and I think this to be somewhat true, having a good year was better than winning. In New York,
Wait. Say that again?
having a good year is better than winning. If I had 50 home runs, we'd come in last.
Oh, to the players, to the
Yeah,
individuals.
sure.
Oh, yeah.
See, the good years are important to players. That's how they make their money. Look at the pool halls. Oh, my God. Anyway, the point I'm making is that winning, when I was in New York with the Yankees, we either won or we lost. In 1954, we won 103 games and came in second. We lost. That's all. The best year Stengel ever had. We lost. And that's how we approached every game. We either won or we lost. Individual marks didn't mean a damn thing, except you wanted to have a good year, obviously. But, I mean, it wasn't the final story on what you did. Winning was everything. So consequently, I think some of that is lost because the money is in there so deep that having a good year is critical. So that, to me, I think is the differences that I learned then. I thought that winning was not as important to some people as it was to me, and consequently, it lasted a year. It was a great experience. Some wonderful people came out of it that I still see all the time. Some I don't appreciate, but I think they were thinking of themselves more than anything else.
But then you went right back into the broadcast booth.
Yeah, well, that was the deal when I went in. I said, look, if this doesn't work, I'm going to be, he said, okay. And that's exactly what happened.
So who are the primary announcers now? I don't.
Ted Leitner is your #1 on radio, and Dick Enberg, your #1 on television.
Oh, that's right. That's pretty cool that Enberg came to do that. I think
he's
that's
a one of the finest broadcasters in the world, really.
He just does it because he likes to broadcast and he lives around here.
Well, I think, you know, with him, I think he got tired of traveling the world over.
Yeah.
And now he's here, he's stabilized, they have a wonderful home in La Jolla, and they're just having a good time.
And he's in his 70s, isn't he?
Well, he's 10 years younger than me. He's 47 and I'm 87.
Yeah. So, yeah, but I mean, I'm just surprised that people want to continue to broadcast baseball games.
Well, it's not it's the work ethic. You know, to me, the dullest thing in the world is when the team goes on the road and I don't travel with them. What do? Nothing. You know, nothing to do.
Do you watch the games?
Oh yeah, I have to watch them because you want to stay on top of what's going on. If they're televised, they may not be televised.
So when they're here, I mean, how much do you actually broadcast these days?
Well, last year I did about 25 games as a color analyst, and I did the manager every day on an interview when they're here. I didn't travel with them, but I went to Arizona and San Francisco on one trip. That was about it. But basically, I don't travel much anymore. I'm the oldest broadcaster in baseball, you know. You think Vince Scully is? I got him by 3 or 4 years. So.
Yeah, like I say, I would rather go to a Little League game.
Well, I mean, you see the charm of that, but to me, professionalism in baseball is exacting. And if you don't do the things you're supposed to do, never mind if you do them well, if you don't show up at the right place or the right base, if you don't get the right cutoff, you don't do all these things are at the major league level technical problems. And if you can't do them, you're not going to win.
Yeah. Well, it's too bad the Padres can't put together a better team, but
Well, we got to wait and see. You know, 2 years ago, we had the same team we had last year and we won. Last year, nothing worked and we lost. Now, you know, we'll have to wait and see. And of course, they're going to change the divisions. You know, they had a 4-6 in the American League. And, I mean, yeah, no, it was a National League, a 4 and 6 in different East, West. Now every division is going to be 5 teams. 5 East, 5 Central, 5 West.
oh, that's good.
And that, well, it's going to stabilize a little bit. Houston, in fact, is going to go into the American League, I believe.
I got to ask you, what do you think of all these gigantic, super expensive baseball parks? What is that? And football stadiums.
Well, it's, if, you know, 2 new parks were built in Cincinnati, 2 new parks in Philadelphia. There are 3 new parks in New York. How much was money by the ownership? I don't know. But I do think they do attract people. Now, Qualcomm Stadium, I didn't think anything wrong with that. It looked okay to me, you know, but apparently people don't like it. And the worst parks in baseball are the most charming. Fenway and Wrigley Field.
Yeah.
They are dumps. You get underneath in the bowels of those stadiums, and you think, my God, there got to be rats around here someplace.
Yeah, my son-in-law went to a game to see the Aztecs play, and he said, people are complaining, oh, look at these old TV screens. This place has got to go.
Well, you know, it's like what Jones did in Dallas with that ballpark. It cost $1 billion. People like that.
So tell me about, I got a couple more questions here.
Sure.
What do you think about kids playing the same sport all year round?
I don't know if it makes any difference. It depends. If they're thinking professional, or if they're thinking of a scholarship in college, stay with something and get good at that. If you can get good at it, you may not be good at it. Yeah, but I don't think. I played basketball in high school. I loved it because at our baseball games, 10 people came, parents.
Yeah.
In basketball, 5,000 people came. It was exciting, you know.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the ham in you, you know. You love to play in front of people, but it's different to me. I think if you're good, you should pick a sport that you're good at. If you're not so good, and you don't have anything else to do, if it affects your studies, don't do it. Get out of it. But I don't think it makes any difference as long as you're doing something besides chasing girls and getting drunk.
Yeah. Well, chasing girls is good.
Well, yeah, but you never catch them.
So who is the best player we ever saw that we never heard of?
Oh, wow. Probably Al Kaline.
Really? Yeah, I know that name.
He's a great right fielder, great player. He led the league in hitting when he was 21.
Really?
But, I mean, he wasn't the greatest player. I think Mays or DiMaggio could go into that category. The best hitters would be Williams and Pujols, I guess now. He's the best. But I look at baseball rather dramatically differently than the players today. I think it's harder to hit now than it was when I played. You know why?
Why?
If you blink, there's a 100-mile-an-hour fastball coming at you from the bullpen, and 4 or 5 of them. One day we had 11 pitchers in the game. Right-hander, bring the right-hander. Left-hander, bring left-hander. I mean, the bullpen has changed the scope of hitting. That's why Williams and his 344 are the best in recent times compared to Gwynn's 388. Gwynn might have been just as good except for the power, because he went against all these guys coming out of the bullpen. What's the first thing the Padres are doing? Trying to shore up their bullpen, because you can't win without it.
Yeah.
You can have good starters. Even Philadelphia, all their great starters had no bullpen. They didn't get the World Series. So to me, I think it's harder to hit now because of that.
Okay, here's another question. Watching the sixth, was it the sixth game of the World Series?
It was quite a World Series, yeah. They should have won it and they blew it. They couldn't get the last out, the bullpen.
Yeah, but the thing that I was watching, I hadn't watched much baseball on television, but I've coached a heck of a lot of pitching and catching. And one I always teach the kids to do, the pitcher, is to go right to fielding position. Throw, go to fielding position. And so I was telling my wife, we're sitting there watching it, I said, look at this guy throw. He's like old Goose Gossett, he goes across his body like this, he ends up facing the wrong direction, and the ball goes right back up the middle.
Yeah, they can't give up the delivery for defense. That's exactly what it is. I know what you're saying. Balls go right through their legs.
Yeah, but I don't understand it. Why aren't it seems like guys at professional level.
Because if you throw a ball and get ready to field, you don't give as much as you want.
Yeah, but the next pitcher up with 2 miles an hour faster.
Yeah.
Different guy, of course.
Yeah, sure.
And I think about, well, who was it? Kevin Brown. It was a great fielder.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was.
Well, a lot of guys are great fielders. Good God. And Bob Gibson used to fall in his fanny and he'd get balls going the other way. I don't know how he recovered. But some guys, we had, I'm trying to think, Lopez was a lousy fielder, and Rashi wasn't very good. Reynolds was good, and Ford was good. But, it varies. I don't know. It's hard to say. Bob Lemon was a good fielder. He started as a third baseman and couldn't hit, so he became a pitcher.
Was it Salazar, or was it the third baseman the Padres had that they put in a pitch every now and then? Was that his name?
Well, if he came in and pitched every now and then, it was because they ran out of pitchers and the game was over.
But he threw really hard.
Yeah.
Well, you'd think a third baseman would be able to throw pretty darn hard. So.
Well, it depends. If the ball doesn't move, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
Got to get it to move a little bit here and there.
So I think I've taken enough of your time, but.
Well, I hope you get what you want. That's all.
Oh, everyone wants to know about DiMaggio and Mantle and guys like that, but I've always heard enough about those guys.
Well, there are three great center fielders in New York: Snyder, Dodgers; Mays, Giants; Mantle, Yankees. The best was Mays defensively. Snyder was probably as good a hitter as any of them. He was the second best in fielding, and Mantle was the least defensive outfielder.
Really?
Yeah, he could run. Did you ever hear about the players complaining about the distance at Fenway? I mean, at Qualcomm. What the hell's the name of that place? Our park.
Jack Murphy Stadium.
No, but
the new Petco Park, right?
Yeah, have you heard of complain about the distance?
Mm-mm.
You haven't?
Mm-mm.
I listen to these guys, and I say, hey guys, it's 396 feet to center field, 402 to left center, 402 to right center. Yankee Stadium was 461 feet to center field, 457 left center, 447 right center, 402 to left field, and you're complaining about distance? Look at what the manager had to hit in. He might have been overall the best player that I ever saw. And I saw him at the end of his career. I played with him for 4 years.
Yeah. Well, you were pretty good friends with him, weren't you?
Well, we went, I got to know, we went to Vietnam. Pete Rose and Joe DiMaggio and I went to Vietnam. I forget when the hell it was. And now Joe's been retired about 10 or 15 years. Nobody wanted to see Rose or Coleman. All they wanted to see was DiMaggio.
Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? I got to ask you one more person.
Go.
Howard Cosell.
Oh, God, Howard and I were good friends. In fact, I used to go up to his house and spend the weekends with my family. That's how I got into broadcasting.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, because he used to take me down to ABC and we'd work at broadcasting. I said, Howard, this isn't going to work. And he said, keep going, keep going. But he was a very, very good friend of mine and changed the scope of broadcasting from a standpoint of really getting after the players, getting questions that were pertinent to the situation. And I liked him, but one night he introduced me. I went to a banquet with him. He said, "General Francis Coleman, number 42, the wrong 42. See, Jackie Robinson was 42, and so was I. I said, "You do that to me again, Howard, and I'm going to walk out." But no, I liked him. And Emmy, his wife, we had great times together.
Well, he did change sports broadcasting, I think.
Oh, yeah. He liked me. And one day, he looked at me, and I was the personnel director for the Yankees at that time. I had 8 minor league teams I had to staff and put in place and so forth. And I loved the job, but I was gone forever. Anyway,
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
he said, "Well, if you weren't going to be the next general manager of the Yankees, have I got a job?" I said, "Let's talk." Well, he had apparently put together something with the Van Heusen Shirt Company. And I said, "Howard, I was sent on a scouting mission to check the Midwest team and the Portland team for playoffs and all this thing. And I came back with a report like this, and I gave it to this guy, and he didn't even ask me for it. And I knew he just got me out of town. So I said, that's it. So I said, "Howard, let's talk." So I went to the Van Heusen Shirt Company with Carl Erskine, Jim Hearn, Rocky Marciano, Carl Fagris, and somebody else and myself. They got sports people together to develop the sportswear. They were the white shirt company at that time. Mm-hmm. But I liked Howard a lot. I really did. We had a lot of fun together.
Yeah, he used to annoy the heck out of people, but
No, he was a good broadcaster. I mean, his style irritated people and everything, but he got things done. He was very good.
well, nowadays it seems like it really be tough to interview athletes, especially when they're young. And let's face it, a lot of them are really good at what they do, but they're not great at presenting their ideas.
Well, they're not talkers. No, I mean, did you ever interview Yogi Berra?
No.
Well, I mean, Lawrence is one of my best friends. We played together for 10 years and knew each other for 30 years and so forth. So we were in Boston at Fenway Park. There was a Kenmore Hotel right around the corner of Fenway Park, and we were having dinner. And some man with these 2 little angel girls, about 11 and 12 or 8, whatever, I don't know. He said, "Mr. Berra," I said, "my daughters just want to say hello to you. And could you do that? Here's Yogi." I almost hit him myself, for God's sakes. But, you know, it wasn't Yogi's problem because he wasn't proficient in communicating.
Well, that's why I guess leading questions work well with athletes.
Yeah, well, look at some of them. You know, Bell, he loves to talk and chat for a week and a half, but most athletes are not proficient in discussing things. And if you think that I became a broadcaster because I studied for it, it's the greatest accident in my life. Because I was with, as I said, the Van Heusen Shirt Company, and Len Faupel, who ran Ballantine, said, "Would you like to do some baseball work?" I said, "Yeah, why not?" So I talked to my Van Heusen people, and I said, "Can I take weekends off?" And so I worked with Dizzy Dean and Pee Wee Reese for 2 years on the Game of the Week. And that led to the Yankee broadcasts, which led to, I tried to get out here. I'll get you out here.
Tremendous amount of athletic ability.
I guess I never thought about it, frankly.
When did you figure that? When did it become apparent?
Well, in 1942, I graduated from high school, and I had a scholarship at USC.
Oh, you did.
In baseball and basketball, actually. And
You were one of the tall guys then, right?
what's that?
You were one of the tall guys then.
Anyway, of course, on December the 7th, the Japanese hit Pearl Harbor, and all dummies like me that are 17 and young and can't wait to get in the war to help win,
Yeah.
So when I graduated from high school, I couldn't get into the V5 program, which trained naval aviators, because I was only 17. So I had to wait till I was 18. So that's how I got into baseball in 1942, to kill the summer. See, I became 18 in September.
Oh.
So I went back to Wellsville, New York. They had 5,000 people in this town. They still have 5,000 people in that town.
Well, how did that, but, you know, that's a semi-pro baseball team, right?
Well, it was a professional team, yeah. And the Yankee scout out here, a guy named Joe Devine, liked me. And I said, Joe, I'm sorry I'm going to college, but maybe later. But then I said, Joe, I said, I'm not going to college. Can we play baseball this summer? That's how I got into baseball in 1942.
Oh, I see.
And then in September, I got back from New York about the first week of September. The season was over. And I went down to the Ferry Building in San Francisco with my high school transcript and all these things you needed to tell people what a great person you were, you know, how they work.
Yeah.
And I joined the B5 program and finally processed through the physical and through the mental. It took about a month, and I finally became a B5 Naval Aviation Cadet.
I'd never heard of that before.
Yeah, Victor 5. Well, V7 was for fleet officers on the high seas, you know.
Right.
V5 was for naval aviation. And the line was from here to Twin Peaks, as I recall, in San Francisco. Everybody wanted to get in.
No kidding.
And then I was activated in the first part of 43, and it took me a year and a half to finish.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I was sort of interested in that part because it didn't seem to. You very briefly mentioned the V5 in your book.
Oh my
Which
God!
I read.
How's that end?
How does it end?
Let me know how it ends.
You never read it?
You know something? I read some excerpts out of it, but here there's a picture of my Wellsville day in there. I think you'll be interested in. There it is. 17 years old in Wellsville, New York.
Oh, you were a big guy. So what did you, when you were a kid, did you go out in the streets playing ball with?
Oh, I
football,
played
basketball?
high school stuff and junior high. I mean,
When you were a kid, 8, 9, 10 years old.
Oh yeah, I was always playing something with tennis balls and bats and little broomsticks and so forth. And we'd use a tennis ball and my dad was a professional baseball player briefly. He couldn't hit well, so he didn't stay around long.
But you apparently could hit a curveball.
Well, I don't know. The curves never appealed to me, frankly. I don't know the truth of it.
Well, who do they?
But I came along at the right time, and when I got to New York, there were a lot of players there that, DiMaggio was there, Hendrick was there, Keller was there, and Bauer and Woodling and.
Well, this is after the war then.
Oh yeah, this is 1948 when I first joined them, late September '48.
So between the time you got out and 48, you were.
Well, no, I got out of the service in '46.
Right.
And in that year, I went to Binghamton, New York, Class A.
Okay.
The next year, I went to Kansas City, which was one league below the big leagues.
Right.
And the next year, I was the last man cut with the Yankees and went to Newark. And in September, they brought me up, and I got to stay after that.
So
My first real year was 1949, but.
I was talking to a guy the other day, and he played 4 years in the Dodger system, but never made it to the bigs. He said Lasorda didn't like him. Well, I don't know.
I mean, that's always a good excuse, but he didn't make it because he couldn't play well enough.
But
the Dodgers had great players.
Well, the point I made to him, I says, that was still probably the best part of your life.
Yeah.
4 years of playing pro ball, traveling around, I mean, I think we all probably remember our early 20s for flying airplanes or playing
when
ball.
When you're young, although I will say this, I got $5,000 my first year in the big leagues. Do you know what a rookie player gets now? $480,000.
Wow.
And if you sit on the bench and do nothing next year, you get $500,000. The difference is incredible. Well, you saw it happen to Pujols, $25 million for 10 years.
At 10 years from now, he won't be worth anything.
Well, he'll probably be a pinch hitter or something. But DiMaggio held out 1 year for $40,000, I think, and they wouldn't give it to him, and he missed a month of the season. And then in 1949, I think it was, he wanted $100,000.
Yeah.
And boy, they fought and battled, and he finally got it because he was the best player in baseball. And Williams was $100,000, Mays was $100,000, Mantle was $100,000, DiMaggio. That was pretty much a plateau.
Yeah.
I know it's a long time ago, but that 100,000 now doesn't reach 25 million, no matter how you cut it.
I lived in Elmhurst, Illinois, and so from 48 to 54. And the oldest and biggest and strongest kid in the neighborhood, Dan Andrus was his name, you know,
Yeah.
having gotten pounded by him a few times. He was from New York. So we could pull for the Cubs, but you had to pull for the Yankees in American League. I mean, that was a given, you know.
Well, you know, in those days, the Yankees were the team of the country,
Oh,
really.
yeah.
You know, and you know, we had a network, radio network, that went all the way down to Florida, all the way through New York and Pennsylvania, and all over Canada, whatever. And now, you know, with it's still a prominent team, but not as it was then. It was the only, and
Which
the only
is-
guy that made it, Musial with Cardinals and Williams with the Red Sox made a difference.
Did you know music before the war?
Well, no, but I went to
I mean,
Europe.
I meant,
No. Williams?
Williams.
No, I met Ted. I knew Ted just as a hi when we were playing each other, and then I got to know him later because he lived out here. And
Yeah.
I thought he was a hell of a guy. In fact, the last time I saw him, remember they brought him out here to the hospital,
Right.
and I went down to see him, and two guys that weighed about 400 pounds had to carry him in, and the poor man was like this.
Oh,
And I thought, why are they keeping this man alive?
yeah.
And he, about 2 or 3 weeks later, he passed. They brought him back to Florida and he died there. But I thought Ted was a outspoken, great. We went back in the service together. You know, we got recalled.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you were flying one thing, he was flying another. So.
Yeah, he was a K3, I was a K6. He was in the F9 and I was in the Corsair.
Well, I mean, to me, the Corsair is one of the coolest airplanes ever made.
Well, the Corsair represents marine aviation, the plane itself. If you talk about marine aviation, think of a Corsair. That was a hell of a plane.